ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकाय चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपः कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरुं वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगणरघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपदान् सहगणललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितंश्च। हे कृष्ण करुणा सिन्धु दीनबन्धो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिकान्त राधाकान्त नमस्तुते। तत्त्वकाञ्चन गौराङ्गी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरि वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपासिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी इति नामिने। नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य सतारिणे।
Thank you. Narayanam namaskrityam naram cheva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayam mudire. Hare Krishna. Resuming almost after a gap of more than 10 days, our study and discussion on the 18th chapter of the first canto entitled Maharaj Parikshit cursed by the Brahmana boy Shringi. So we'll resume from verse number 38 and just a brief recap to where we are in this chapter. This is actually where Shringi, he becomes so much disturbed, so much agitated that he very immaturely, he curses Maharaj Parikshit. He uses very inappropriate verses saying that he is the most wretched person in his lineage, in his dynasty. And he compares Maharaj Parikshit to upstarts and dogs. And after cursing Maharaj Parikshit, Shringi enters the hermitage to meet his father, Samik Rishi. Verse number 37, we discussed last time. The Brahmana's son cursed the king thus: on the seventh day from today, a snake bird will bite the most wretched one of that dynasty, because of his having broken the law of etiquette by insulting my father. And Prabhupada in the purport says, this is how the degradation of the Brahminical class began. Here is the evidence, the first downfall. Because the Brahmana boy considered Maharaj Parikshit to be a Kulangar or the rest of his dynasty. But factually, the Brahmana boy himself was so, because only from him did the Brahmana's caste become powerless. Now, moving forward. Tatho abhyetaya ashramam balasar ashramam balogale sarpakale varam Pitaram Viksha Dukkharto Muktakanto Rurodaha. Thereafter, when the boy returned to the hermitage, he saw the snake on his father's shoulder, and out of his grief, he cried very loudly. Muktakanto Rurodaha. Please remember, what was his father, Shamik Rishi, in? He was in complete trance. But when this boy, he entered the hermitage and he again saw the dead snake coiled around his father's neck, he began to cry very loudly, very profusely, very bitterly. He began to cry. The boy was not happy because he committed a great mistake. And he wanted to be relieved of the burden of his heart by crying. So after entering the hermitage and seeing his father in that condition, he cried loudly so that he might be relieved. But it was too late. The father regretted the whole incident. So we see the reaction of Shringi, how he reacted when he saw the dead snake encircle around his father. He was so much disturbed, so much distressed, that he cursed Maharaj Parikshit. But you remember what Srila Prabhupada wrote about Samak Muni when he was in meditation? What did Prabhupada write about him? That he was on the complete transcendental platform. Both he and the king, they were both transcendentalists. So when the father came to know about the curse by his son, Shringi, how he responds, or what is his response, how he reacts. Save Angirisha Brahmana Shutva Suta Vilapanam Unmilya Sanakir Netra Dishtva Chamse Mrita Urugam. O Brahmana, the Rishi, who was born in the family of Angira Muni. Who is speaking? Suta Goswami is speaking to the assembled sages. So, O Brahmanas, the Rishi, that is Samik Rishi, who was born in the family of Angira Muni. That is his lineage. Hearing his son crying, gradually opened his eyes and saw the dead snake around his neck. So far, we see that Samik Rishi had given no response at all to what Maharaj Parikshit did. When he opened his eyes by the profuse crying of his son, Shringi, he became aware of what had happened. Visrijetam cha prapracha vatsa kasmadhirodisi kene vate prakritam iti yukta sa nyavedayat. He threw the dead snake aside and asked the son why he was crying. You see how two different level of consciousness people respond to the same situation. What Shringi saw and how he reacted by cursing Maharaj Parikshit. And when Samik Rishi saw the snake encircle around his neck, he just threw the dead snake aside as if nothing had happened. And he asked his son why he was crying, whether anyone had done him harm. On hearing this son explained to him what had happened. The father did not take the dead snake on his neck very seriously. He simply threw it away. Actually, there was nothing seriously wrong in Maharaj Parikshit's act. But the foolish son took it very seriously. And being influenced by Kali, he cursed the king and thus ended a chapter of happy history. So many lessons are learned from this episode of Shamik Rishi becoming aware to what happened, and he completely ignored the episode as if it was completely unimportant. There was no need to give any importance to what had happened. Bhagavad Gita, Krishna speaks so many times in the second chapter, even in so many chapters, that one who is in bodily consciousness is overly concerned with his honor and pride. But one who is on the spiritual platform, he is completely unaffected by acts of honor and pride, because it both pertains to one's body and mind. And one who has realized himself as the spirit soul, he is unaffected by both. So we see how it happens. It is here in this episode of Shamik Rishi. But the boy who was immature, he was not on the transcendental platform. He was on the mental platform. He was very much affected. And he took it very seriously. Nishamya saptam atad arham narendranam sabrahmano na atmajam abhayanadad aho batomo mahad adete kritam alpiyasi droha urirdamodhita. The father heard from the son that the king has been cursed, although he should have never been condemned. Why? Because he was a Rajrishi, not an ordinary king. But he was the best among all human beings. Nara Indram, Narendram. Amongst the humans, he was the best of the kings. One who is the king of the demigods. So among the human, he was the best of the kings. The Rishi did not congratulate his son, but on the contrary began to repent, saying, Alas, what a greatly sinful act was performed by my son. He has awarded heavy punishment for an insignificant offense. So the father did not support his son. What Shringi did. Rather, he felt very regretful. The king is the best of all human beings. He is the representative of God. The word is Naradeva. Here it is Narendram. Naradeva. And he is never to be condemned for any of his actions. Prabhupada gives a very important statement. And he is never to be condemned for any of his actions. Who are we to judge what is right or what is wrong? In other words, the kings can do no wrong. The king may order hanging of a culprit son of a Brahmana, but he does not become sinful for killing a Brahmana. Prabhupada is quoting to such an extent. Even if there is something wrong with the king, he is never to be condemned. This is true for all those who are the true representative of the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord can never commit any wrong. For those who are the representative, they are also on the same platform. And of course, here the king was Naradev or Narendra. A medical practitioner may kill a patient by mistaken treatment, but such a killer is never condemned to death. So, what to speak of good and pious kings like Maharaj Parikshit? In the Vedic way of life, the king is trained to become a Raj Rishi or a great saintly, although he is ruling as king. So, he is a ruler, an administrator, Raja, but his consciousness is elevated to the level of being a renunciate sage, Rishi. In the Vedic way of life, the king is trained to become a Raj Rishi or a great saint, although he is ruling as king. It is the king only by whose good government the citizens can live peacefully and without any fear. The first duty of the king to provide his citizen the opportunity for all to remain and live peacefully without any fear. The Raj Rishi would manage his kingdom so nicely and piously that his subjects would respect him as if he was the Lord himself. That is the instruction of the Vedas. Sakshat Haritvena Samasta Shastre. The king is called Narendra, or the best among the human beings. How then could a king like Maharaj Parikshit be condemned by an inexperienced, puffed up son of a Brahmana, even though he had attained the powers of a qualified Brahmana? Since Samik Rishi was an experienced good Brahmana, he did not approve of the actions of his condemned son. He began to lament for all that his son had done. Very important. He was completely beyond the bodily platform of honor and dishonor. And he did not approve of what Shringi did. The king was beyond the jurisdiction of curses as a general rule. And what to speak of a good king like Maharaj Parikshit? The offense of the king was most insignificant. And his being condemned to death was certainly a very great sin for Shringi. Therefore, Rishi Samik regretted the whole incident. So, Samik Rishi was regretful and in his heart very fearful of the grave sinful reaction that will come to his son Shringi as a result of his immature action of cursing Maharaj Parikshit. Nave nirbhir nardevam parakyam sammatam arhasi apipakva buddhe yat tejasa durvihisena gupta vidanti bhadrani akuto bhayam praja. Oh my boy, this is Samik Rishi speaking to his son Shringi. Your intelligence is immature. And therefore you have no knowledge that the king, who is the best among human beings, is as good as the personality of Godhead. The word here is Nardeva. He is never to be placed on an equal footing with common man. Very important for us to apply. that those who are representatives, they should never be placed on the equal footing with a common man, or we should not try to find faults. The citizens of the state live in prosperity, being protected by his unsurpassable prowess. And because of the presence of such a person, everyone else is safe, secure, and they all progress. So never ever the Supreme Lord's representative here is acting in the capacity of a king. They should never ever be criticized or condemned, but to speak of being cursed. अलक्ष्य माने नरदेव नाम्नि रथांग प्राणवयम अंगलोकः तदा हि चौरा प्रचुरो विनक्ष्यति अरक्ष्यमानो अविविरोधवत् कंचनात्. My dear boy, the Lord who carries the wheel of a chariot, Rathanga Pani. One who Krishna is known as Rathanga Pani. Why? Why is Krishna known as Rathanga Pani? Yes, Sonika?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Okay.
Prabhuji, Rathang means the part of Ratha, that is Chakra, and the wheel of Ratha, and he was carrying the wheel of Ratha during in front of Bhishma, so he's called Chakrapani or Rathangpani.
Yes, because when Bhishma was attacking Arjuna, and Arjuna is the representative of the Supreme Lord, selected by the Supreme Lord himself, and his life was in danger. So what Krishna did, when he saw imminent danger for Arjuna, he jumped out of his chariot and he pulled the wheel of the chariot and encircled it in such a way to make it his wheel, Sudarshan Chakra. And he was about to release that wheel to kill Bhishma Dev. So he is also known as Rathangapani. And who says this? This is Bhishma Dev speaking in his prayer. When he sees Krishna charging him with the wheel of the chariot, so he is known as Rathangapani. So Bhishma Dev becomes very joyous to see this. That to what extent the Supreme Lord can go to protect his representative or his devotee. So here the same feeling Samik Rishi is expressing. That my dear boy, the Lord who carries the wheel of a chariot is represented by the monarchical regime. What have you done? Whom have you cursed? And when this regime is abolished, the whole world becomes filled with thieves. Tadahi chaura prachur. Prachur means profusely. Prachura. Chaura prachura. Chaura means the thieves and the rogues. So we need some administrative monarch by whose prowess, by whose power all the rogues and the thieves are subdued. Who then at once vanquish the unprotected subject like scattered lamb. So if the protection is gone for the mass of men, then what will be the situation of the subjects? So Samik Rishi is very much horrified to see the future without the presence of Maharaj Parikshit. According to Srimad Bhagavatam, the monarchical regime represents the Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead. Very clear, Prabhupada is very emphatically saying that the monarchical regime represents the Supreme Lord. And he always projects, Prabhupada said, for democracy. What was the very famous statement Srila Prabhupada made for democracy? Anyone remembers? What Prabhupada said for democracy. In today's world, we don't see the monarchical regime. Of course, there was no true representative of the Supreme Lord. Most of them were exploitatives. But Prabhupada never approved this kind of electing the president or electing the administrative head. As we say, is democracy. What Prabhupada used to say? Demon crazy. Democracy is a representation of demon crazy. Unqualified people select and most unqualified person. That is not the true representation of the Supreme Lord. The king is said to be the representative of the absolute personality of Godhead because he is trained to acquire the qualities of God to protect the living beings. He must be trained. Three things we learn: culture, education, and devotion. Srila Prabhupada speaks in his one of the purports, 4.1. Imam vivasvate yoga proktavan hamabhyam vivasvan manve prahur manur ikshava ke avravit. The Prabhupada talks about the history and the legacy of this spiritual knowledge, this transcendental knowledge. And Prabhupada says that all the executive heads of all the states and planets are obliged to impart this lesson to the citizens by education, culture, and devotion. In other words, the executive heads of the states are intended to spread the science of Krishna consciousness so that the people may take advantage of the great science and pursue the successful path, utilizing the opportunity of the human form of life. And what does the king protect them from? What is the protection that the king provides? One is that they can follow the path of spiritual advancement. And what is it that the king protects them from? Who remembers? Very powerful purport. What does the king represent the citizens from? No one remembers. What study we have done? Find out. That is the duty of everyone who takes a leadership position or wants to become a representative of the Supreme Lord. It is his duty to impart this transcendental knowledge so that the others can progress on the path of spiritual. And he is trained to acquire the qualities of God to protect the living beings. The battle of Kurukshetra was planned by the Lord to establish the real representative of the Lord, Maharaj Yudhishthira, an ideal king, thoroughly trained by culture and devotional service, with the martial spirit, makes a perfect king. Such a personal monarchy is far better than a so-called democracy of no training and responsibility. Prabhupada is criticizing, condemning today's arrangements. Such a monarchy, personal monarchy, is far better than the so-called democracy of no training and responsibility. The thieves and rogues of modern democracy seek election by misrepresentation of vote. And the successful rogues and thieves are like wolves who devour the mass of population as if they were scattered lamb. One trained monarch is far better than hundreds of useless ministerial rogues. And it is hinted herein that by the abolition of the monarchical regime, like that of Maharaj Parikshit, the mass of people became open to many attacks of the age of Kali. They were never happy in much advertised democracy. The result of such a kingless administration is described in the following verse. So Samyak Rishi is very, very scared. He has great concern. What will be the future? Because his inexperienced son has cursed Maharaj Parikshit. And in absence of Parikshit, who will give protection? Who will give this guidance for the citizens to progress on the spiritual perfection? Tadadhyana papam upeti ananvayam yannasthanathasya vasur viplomapakad parasparam gnanati sapanti vrinjate pashun striyo arthan purudasvyo janah. Due to the termination of the monarchical regime and the plundering of the people's wealth by rogues and thieves, there will be great social disruptions. This is what Samyak Rishi could foresee. People will be killed and injured, and animals and women will be stolen. And for all this sins, we shall be responsible. So he is finding himself responsible for the act of his inexperienced son. Himself meaning his entire Brahmana caste. The word na, we are very significant in this verse. The sage rightly takes the responsibility of the Brahmanas as a community for killing monarchical government and thus giving an opportunity to the so-called democrats who are generally plunderers of wealth of the state subjects. So we see all these politicians. What are they? They are all exploitative or plunderers of wealth of the state subject. The so-called democrats capture the administrative machine without assuming responsibility for the prosperous conditions of the citizens. So once they get the power, what they do? They use their power for their personal gains and they exploit or they plunder. As we see, you see the case of all the politicians. Very recently in the state capital, we saw one incumbent government was thrown out. Why? Because they came with a promise that they will never ever enjoy the positions and the power which they will be bestowed upon if they become in government. And what do we see after 12, 14 years of the regime? So much corruption at every level. Why? Because all of them are representatives of Kali. Please try to understand. A monarchical king is the representative of the Supreme Lord. And all these politicians, they are the representative of Kali. So how can they protect the citizens from the influence of Kali? So Shamik Rishi is very much disturbed. He is feeling himself responsible for such a degradation of the society. Everyone captures the post for personal gratification, and thus, instead of one king, a number of irresponsible kings grew up to tax the citizens. It is foretold herein that in the absence of good monarchical government, everyone will be the cause of disturbance for others by plundering riches, animals, movements, etc. So there will be complete exploitative tendencies. And Maharaj Shamik, Maharaj Rishi Samik is very much able to see what will happen in future. Verse number 45. Tadarya dharma praviliyate nirnam varnashrama chara yuktastrai manya tato artha tathartha kama abhiniveshita atmanam sunam kapinam iva varna sankara. At that time, the people in general will fall systematically from the path of progressive realization in respect to the qualitative engagements of the caste and the orders of society and the Vedic injunctions. So if the right representative of the Supreme Lord is not there to guide, to lead, and to protect, so everyone in general will fall down. There is no question of any progress or elevation. And then the system which the Supreme Lord has established of Chaturvarna Maya system, Guna Karma Vibhagasha. The Guna and the Karma will be collapsed. The caste and the order of society and the Vedic injunctions, they will all be dismantled. Thus, they will be more attracted. People will be more attracted to economic development for sense gratification. As we say today, very rampant. Everyone is enamored by sense gratification. And how do they attain this sense gratification? By economic development. And as a result, there will be unwanted population on the level of dogs and monkeys. When the Varnashram system is dismantled, the entire population will be one Sankara. If there is no Varnashram, there is one Sankara, unwanted population. It is foretold herein that in the absence of a monarchical regime, the general mass of people will be unwanted population like dogs and monkeys. Prabhupada very categorically said that today's society has gone to dogs and cats. On what basis? Because of Varna Sankara. As the monkeys are too sexually inclined and the dogs are shameless in sexual intercourse. The general mass of population born of illegitimate connection will systematically go astray from the Vedic ways of good manners and qualitative engagements in the caste and orders of life. A Vedic way of life is the progressive march of the civilization of the Aryans. The Aryans are progressive in the Vedic civilization. The Vedic civilization's destination is to go back to Godhead, back home, where there is no birth, no death, no old age, and no disease. The Vedas direct everyone not to remain in the darkness of the material world, but to go towards the light of the spiritual kingdom, far beyond the material sky. Tamsoma Jyotirgamaya. The qualitative caste system and the orders of life are scientifically planned by the Lord and his representatives, the great rishis. And when did Krishna give this order of caste and social order? Just before the advent of Kali Yuga. So it is like Shringi, immature to speak that in Kali Yuga there cannot be Varnashram system. Krishna is recommending it. The qualitative caste system and the orders of life are scientifically planned by the Lord and his representative, the great rishis. This perfect way of life gives all sorts of instructions in matters both material and spiritual. The Vedic way of life does not allow any man to be like monkeys and dogs. Following Mammon's philosophy of simply devoting oneself to economic development for sense gratification. Such a degraded civilization of sense gratification and economic development is the byproduct of godless or kingless government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Prabhupada makes the slogan of democracy so cheap that such a degraded civilization of sense gratification and economic development is the byproduct of a godless or kingless government of the people, by the people, and for the people. The people should not therefore blame the poor administration, for they themselves elect. Few more verses are left. I'll discuss it possibly tomorrow. 5, 6 verses are there. It is still 50. We'll complete the chapter tomorrow. So we see the great concern, a great condemnation, self-condemnation by Maharaj, the Rishi Samik. He did not approve of what his son did. Neither did he disapprove of what the king did. For he can see the consequences of losing such a saintly king as Maharaj Parikshit. What could be the consequences? This is making him feel very disturbed, very insecure. Hare Krishna, stop here. Any discussion? Very important principle. But not try to judge the representative of the Supreme Lord by our own immature and lusty intelligence. Otherwise, we'll commit a very grave offense, like Shringi did. Hare Krishna. Amoha. Hare Krishna.
Hare
Nine
Krishna.
discussion. Hare Krishna. All of you resumed your services today?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Pradeep?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay. Well, we do not speak, then do we realize what Samik Rishi is speaking in these verses? So if we follow our spiritual master, who is the head of the monarchical regime, then we are safe, we are secure, and our progress, the spiritual path, is certain. Hare Krishna, I'll stop here and we'll try to Keep it around 9, not later than 9. So as we have all discussed, everyone, including me, we should have our cutoff time. We should not remain awake after 10, and no one will sleep after 4. Please try to follow it every day. At least in Mayapur, you were all great yogis. Everyone was waking up before 3. No one slept not even a minute after 3. But don't convert that yogi to become a bhogi. Don't change. And every day, please send your sadhana card without fail. Manini Mataji, sadhana card should come every day.
हरे कृष्ण प्रभु जी, दंडवत प्रणाम जी प्रभु जी।
Last 2 दिन से भेजा नहीं आपने.
सॉरी प्रभु जी।
Then we are allowing our mind to dictate. That is again the symptom of demon crazy. Our mind is a demon and it has crazy ideas. Hare Krishna. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Nitai Gaur Premanandi. Hari Hari Bol. Hare Krishna.